is Corinne Boudreau, and welcome to Certainties Law. Today's video blog is about dividends. It's called It'll Pay Dividends. I was going to do a blog about resolutions, but we'll leave those till January. So why am I talking about dividends? Well, I think it's a good way to illustrate how you can work with Certainties Law. One of the taglines has become working with accountants to implement the legal aspects of tax planning. So dividends are obviously an important part of tax planning, so I'd like to work with you on implementing the payment of those dividends. So what is a dividend? A dividend is a share of profits that are allocated to the shareholders of the company. So if you're lucky enough to have profits, who is it who declares the dividends? It's the directors. So when a company is incorporated, it needs to have at least one director. It can certainly have more than that. So the proper way to declare a dividend is to have the directors do so. So how do you pay a dividend? Well, I think cases and commentary on dividends in the Income Tax Act have said that doing a journal entry just by itself is not enough to indicate the payment of a dividend. Journal entries are meant to reflect what has happened, but they're not enough to actually implement something or be evidence of what's actually happened. So doing a journal entry is not enough to indicate the payment of a dividend. Sometimes I'm asked about, can we do a promissory note to pay a dividend? And I think that's fine. I think it's been established that that's fine. I think you just have to link that into the payment of a dividend, tie it back to the dividend and how it's being paid. So what is the gold standard for payment of a dividend? Well, I think you have to start with a written director's resolution. As I said, it's the job of directors to declare dividends from the profits of a company. And the Companies Act specifically says that you can do a written director's resolution to evidence the payment of a dividend or other directors' actions. So you don't have to have a meeting, you just need to do a resolution which is signed by all of the directors. So if you have a written resolution, what should be in it? Well, I think the first thing is there should be some indication, a reference to the solvency test, or the fact that the profits are the dividend is actually coming from the profits of the company. As I said, the profits belong to the company until they're actually allocated to the shareholders through the payment of a dividend. So you want to make sure first, I think, that you're meeting the solvency test. So a good way to do that is to indicate the directors. The directors can indicate that in the director's resolution. The second thing is, I think it's good to have the word dividend in there somewhere. I've occasionally come across a resolution which just says I'm paying $50,000 to X, and it doesn't actually use the word dividend. So I think, again, it's important to have the word dividend in there. Obviously, if you're declaring a capital dividend or an eligible dividend, or you're redeeming shares which are creating a deemed dividend, it's important to have that information in there too. But at the very least, you should have the word dividend in there so it's clear what's being declared. Along those lines, I think it's important to reference the class of shares. We certainly have lots of classes of shares which have a discretionary dividend entitlement these days, so it's not immediately obvious what class of shares you'd be declaring the dividends on. So you should reference the class of shares in there. The next thing I think is the declaration and payment dates. So those can be the same or they can be different, but you certainly want to make sure that you get a date in the year. So if it's December 31st, 2012, you want that to be the date in the resolution. The next thing is how the dividend is going to be paid. So we talked about a promissory note. I think it's fine to pay, as I said, it's fine to pay by promissory note, but ideally you would say that you're paying the dividend via promissory note right in the written director's resolution. Also, if you're paying it by a set-off on the shareholder loan account, ideally you would also reference that. Or if you're paying it by check or however, that should be ideally referenced in the resolution so that it's clear how the dividend is being paid. Lastly, the dividend resolution needs to be signed by the directors. Again, I said that's the evidence that they've approved the payment of the dividend. If you have more than one directors, it's fine to sign it by counterpart on different pieces of paper of the resolution. But you do need to have all of the directors sign the resolution if you're doing a written resolution. So, and when we come back to it'll pay dividends, if you're an accountant or a tax preparer, it'll certainly feel better when it comes to January or February when you're doing your T5s to have a nicely crafted written director's resolution in your file to evidence the payment of the dividend and the deduction thereof. So thank you for joining me for my video blog today, It'll Pay Dividends. And thank you for joining us at Two Certainties Law, where the other two certainties are price and quality. Thank you. Bye.